Hey everyone, Brendan Sander here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to another episode of Hated Albums in My Music Collection, number 4. That's right, there are 3 previous episodes of this. If you like this one, do check it out. I'm going to leave a link in the description. But basically what I'm talking about here is that, not all albums can be the best. Certainly that's for sure. And sometimes there's some major missteps in what bands do, the sound, the style, that sort of stuff. And I basically hate having it in the collection, but as a completist, I have those albums, and oftentimes I tried to dive into them when they first came out at that time. And, it's one of those things that I will continue to try. You never know when your musical taste will change, but all in all, this is me running through 10 hated albums in my music collection. We're going to jump into it here in just a bit. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also, leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, if you turn on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and you'll stay up to date on really cool things just like this with hated albums in my music collection, number 4. All right, so no particular order other than I'm doing it alphabetical order. And so we are going to jump right into it here with Aerosmith, Honkin on Bobo from 2004, their 14th studio album. It was produced by Jack Douglas, and the idea of this, where the band was going to do blues covers from the 50s and 60s, so stuff that was like Train Kept A-Rollin', which we all loved, and other ones that were like that. It sounded really good, although it just, for me, it did not hit the spot. It did not hit the mark. When I got this here, I liked the opening track and it very quickly fell off after that. There was just nothing on here that lived up to the types of style and sound that Aerosmith had made famous for itself, even when it did a cover song like Train Kept A-Rollin'. And the funny thing is when talking about it, the band, Steven Tyler in particular, having said that they made the album because they found out Eric Clapton was making a blues album. But Eric Clapton always sounded blues and did blues style. And so for him to do it, it's not that far of a stretch. But for Aerosmith to move from their hard rock sound into a strictly blues sounding style, even though it was revved up a bit, it really wasn't made unique to the Aerosmith sound. And so this is one of those ones that for 20 years at this point, I have tried. I'll pull it out, and I love Roadrunner on it. And even Baby Please Don't Go is pretty cool. And I did like their one original song, The Grind. It was okay. I think maybe if they had done half newly written blues songs, their style, and half cover songs, I maybe could have gotten into it a bit more. But all in all, this is just one of those ones that at the time, I don't know, I was doing the whole, palm plant or head plant or whatever they call that, not understanding why a band would do something that is so outside of their sound and style that they've made popular. I mean, I know everyone's right now screaming and saying, yeah, but Aerosmith has always been a blues rock band. Yes, but a blues rock band, not a blues band. And so anyway, also probably should preference this and say, I'm not a fan of the blues. I like to play the blues on the guitar, but I'm not a fan of listening to the blues. And so probably a bunch of you guys out there do love this album, and that's cool. But for those of us that are Aerosmith fans and not fans of the blues, this here was just such a turnoff for me. And it's one of those ones that I wish they had never made, quite frankly. All right, moving on. Misfits and Sam Hain frontman Danzig and Danzig 5 Blackacidevil. It was his 5th studio album, came out in 1996. It was the first album on new record label Hollywood Records, which I bet they had no idea what they were getting when they signed him. And so this is after him leaving Rick Rubin's label American Recordings, and Rick Rubin is the one that took him and essentially did a hard rock, blues sounding, Sabbath sounding style that was Danzig, pulling him from the Misfits and Sam Hain's sounds, doing that. And as soon as he leaves, it's like he ditches it. I don't know. It was one of those things, again, where First one to have an entirely new band. So it was like, new band, a new label, new sound, everything. I really don't know why it was under the band name of Danzig. It should have come out under Glenn Danzig, or maybe given it a new band name, but it's just one of those albums now that stands out like a sore thumb. This was also kind of strange in that Glenn Danzig played all the guitar on it except for 3 solos that were done by Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains. And when I first read that he was part of it, I thought, how cool is that? If we're going to get an Alice in Chains sounding style album with Jerry Cantrell backing up Glenn Danzig, that would be cool. But it was not to be the case. And if it didn't have Jerry Cantrell's name on it, for me at least, I wouldn't even recognize that he was playing on it. So it just comes off as this industrial metal tinged album that was, the sounds were popular of the day. It was something he was jumping on the bandwagon for. I know that now, seeing it in the whole of Glenn Danzig's catalog, where he did a lot of do-it-yourself style albums from the Misfits, Sam Hain, and then going on after this, that's really kind of been his MO. But at the time, for there to be the 4 Danzig albums that had a particular sound, really well produced, to then go to this industrial sound was just kind of a head scratcher for me. Okay, next up, I love Kiss, I do, but this album, Kiss's Music from the Elder, 1981, 9th studio album, first to feature new drummer Eric Carr, which they just did not use him to the fullest capacity at all. It was such a waste of Eric Carr's talents making this album as the first thing. Obviously, the album we know well, meaning it's a failed attempt at a concept album. The overly orchestrated feel of this thing, I think, makes it sound very dated today. And it just doesn't hold up well. There's a few songs on it that I do like that stand out. Mr. Blackwell, the song Only You on here, The Oath. Those songs I all really like, but the rest of it just is so far removed from Kiss, in my opinion, that it's kind of cringeworthy. It really is another one of those albums that, for me at least, sounded very forced, sounded like they were jumping on the bandwagon. I don't know if concept albums were popular at the time and place of this, but they were trying to do something that was unique, I guess, at the time. And it just came off sounding too forced and contrived to me. And one of the ones I've gone back many times trying to listen to, but I can't get past it because, for me, it feels a bit outside of their comfort zone and a bit cringeworthy at some points with what they're trying to do on it. All right, now this one here may surprise you guys because the album is so new, and I really don't see this album growing on me in time and changing my opinion or anything like that. But I was surprised to see that I've actually got 2 albums of the 2024 year that I already hate. And I'm talking about former Motley Crue guitarist Mick Mars and The Other Side of Mars. And I did know what I was getting when I bought this, so it's on me. But being a huge Motley Crue fan and a Mick Mars fan, I wanted to have it. I wanted to really give it its due and test it out. Frontman on here, Jacob Bunton, I knew from previous Adler's Appetite and Adler, the band, and so I liked him. So it wasn't one of those things where it was, okay, I'm not going to like it entirely. Maybe there's other stuff deeper on the album that I'm going to like. But the first 3 singles didn't really do anything for me, although I gave them some serious listens, and I did warm up a bit to them. But I gotta say, as a whole, when I listen to this album, there's nothing on here that at all tells me this is Mick Mars. There's none of the blues hard rock sound that he made famous with Motley Crue, or anything that I would expect as a Mick Mars person, or something from him that he likes. It sounds completely outside of the wheelhouse and style of Mick Mars and Motley Crue. And no, it doesn't have to sound like either of those 2 things, I guess. But the thing is, for Mick Mars to be crying about albums like Generation Swine and other albums that he wasn't really used and pushed to the side on and all that sort of stuff. And the thing is, it's like, first thing you do is go out and make an album that sounds like it should be the new Motley Crue album, instead of making what it is that you claim that the band should have been doing the whole time. And it sounds a little strange. It sounds like he's trying to stay relevant and popular. And maybe Nikki Sixx isn't the only one that was in Motley Crue forcing the band to do things that were relevant and jump on bandwagons and all that sort of stuff. But who knows? But all in all, this is just one of those albums. If it didn't have Mick Mars' name on it, one, I wouldn't have bought it. And two, I wouldn't even know that he was playing on it. Okay. Next up is Australian rockers Midnight Oil, Redneck Wonderland from 1998. 10th studio album. I love everything that this band had done, I should say. And expected great things from this album here. It was the first album following their greatest hits album, 20,000 Watts, released in 1997, which did have 2 new songs on it. And those songs would later appear on this. And so we knew that they were leaning in that whole industrial, sound sample, looped sound, drum beats, or whatever you want to call it, style. But I was not expecting what we got when we got this album here. It's just super jarring, and it's just almost a cacophonous sound, meshing, whatever, of styles in here that isn't anything like what the band had made a name for itself in the more organic sounds. And they ultimately went back to it after this and have continued with that on their latest stuff since reforming. But for bands that make albums that are not their signature sound and style, and of the 90s, there were a lot of bands trying different things. And I guess it was their attempt to stay relevant. These bands had not known changes in the music industry. And so a lot of bands went and tried to jump on bandwagons and do certain things, or even make things that were completely left field. Some bands tried to reinvent themselves, like Metallica with Saint Anger, and make an entirely new metal sound that didn't take. And you only had very few bands that were able to do it, like U2 with Octoon Baby, and a few others out there that were able to reinvent themselves. But this one here, just not it. And it's one of those albums that I still to this day shake my head at and wonder what the heck they were thinking of, and why would a band even go and make something that doesn't sound like anything from their past life cycle and put it out there. How did they think their fans were going to come along for the ride on that? But they did. All right, now moving on. This one here is probably going to surprise a lot of you guys, but hear me out on it. We're talking about progressive rock band Pink Floyd, who, yes, is my favorite band. Ummagumma, 1969. I've long since said how much I hate this album, so it really shouldn't be that big of a surprise. 4th studio album, albeit it is split on a double LP, one side, or one LP of it is live, one LP of it being the studio. And yet the live album, and then the studio album has solo material from each of the 4 members. And in concept, it sounds like it should be a pretty cool thing to get. But it really all comes down to the Roger Waters composition on here. Several species of a small furry animal gathered together in a cave and grooving with a pick. That here is just the weirdest thing that is on here. And at the middle of the album, it breaks the flow and it absolutely drives me nuts. But I have to say the rest of what's on here from the other people isn't all that great either. So it's not like we've got fantastic stuff from David Gilmour. Nick Mason's stuff on here is really off the wall as well. So the only thing that is really the saving grace is the live album that's on here, of which I'm not the biggest fan of live albums, but it also takes it away from being a studio album. So it's just one of those things that is like, I get it, I see what it is, and I try to remember it for what it was at the time and the conceptual idea of it. But it's just far too experimental for me. And it's one of those things that I have because I'm a huge fan of Pink Floyd, but I never go back to it. And I just always bypass it in the collection. Though I know a lot of you guys love this album. And I would think a lot of people like it for the live album aspect, but not for the studio aspect. And really what I'm talking about here when I talk about hated albums are the studio albums. The albums that aren't just live albums, aren't greatest hits albums, that sort of stuff that are albums that are to, define a band, and then you get what you get. And I think they're big missteps. And for me, this was a big misstep. Like the next one here, we got metal band Quiet Riot, Road Rage from 2017, 13th studio album from the band. It was the first album without founding member and frontman Kevin Dubrow on vocals. We had a new vocalist coming in, James Durbin, who was a former American Idol runner-up or contestant or alumni, whatever. And in and of itself, that just threw me for a loop. Anytime you've got a metal band like Quiet Riot pulling somebody from American Idol, that just really sat wrong with me. It was also the last album to feature Frankie Banali on drums before his passing. Not that that has anything to do with the album itself. It's just that he was trying to continue on and keep the name Quiet Riot going on. And I know he had permission from Kevin Dubrow's mom. I guess she got the rights, to, after his passing and whatnot. And he had the blessing, Frankie Banali had the blessing to do it. So I get it. But there were no original members left in the band at this point. That also rubbed me the wrong way. And I would say, I really wanted to give it a chance, see what it is. But on the end of the day, for me at least, it doesn't have any of the sounds or original style of what made Quiet Riot. And the lyrical content on here, I just felt was really kind of silly. If you look at the title of these songs, you've got a song called Roll This Joint, Freak Flag, Wasted, Renegades. I don't know, Knock 'em Down. It just, the lyrical content moves in that direction. And I know that, we also have to take into account that they had another guy, Sean Nichols, who didn't work out and left after the album was completed. And instead of releasing that, they brought in a different singer, re-recorded, and then put it out. But then within 2 albums, he leaves. And so now they're stuck with these 2 albums. And they've not yet made another album with returning frontman Jizzy Pearl. And Frankie Banali's passed away, and you've got, the bass player, Rudy Sarzo, but no original guys in there again. And it's just one of those things that's kind of, in my opinion, very sad to see about a band running the band name into the ground with what they're doing, instead of it really being a legitimate thing that the band is moving forward and building on a legacy. And that's just not happening with Quiet Riot. And I think that's the biggest letdown as far as this album is concerned. All right, now I talked about having 2 albums from 2024 in here that are already hated albums in my collection. And the second one here goes to Guns N' Roses guitarist Slash, Orgy of the Damned. And I'm a huge Guns N' Roses fan and a huge Slash solo fan, so I should love this. And I really, really wanted to. In fact, there's so many cool guests on this thing that you would think this would be a great album. But like Aerosmith's Honkin' on Bobo, this is a blues covers album. And he brings in a lot of guests on this thing, which was like his first solo album, this one being technically the second Slash solo album, if we don't count things like Slash's Snake Pit or the Conspirator Project and things. But we've got Brian Johnson of AC/DC on here, Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes, Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, Iggy Pop of the Stooges, and Paul Rogers of Bad Company. All on this thing suggesting that this was going to be a killer album, but it doesn't sound anything like Slash. There's no element to this that I think sounds like Slash. So whereas he has such a unique lead style that he plays in, that I would expect that. And had we had that, or we had Guns N' Roses interpreted versions of blues songs, but they're just straight ahead blues numbers. And I guess we'll go back to the fact that I'm not a fan of the blues, so that pulls it for me at least. And I always wonder why these artists go and do it. And I know they're doing it for their love. It's something they want to do, and more power to them to make the album that they want to make. But these things just ultimately bomb. In the end of the day, they become the lowest selling albums of these artists' careers, of Aerosmith's, of Slash. These things don't stay on the chart or chart very high and fall away very quickly. Nobody talks about them going forward after that. And that's what's happening here with this one. So, yeah, I respect artists who want to make albums. Yes, he did do it under his Slash solo name, and okay, that's fine. And he didn't make Miles Kennedy do it, and I have to respect that, but it's just not something that I will ever go back to and listen to, except probably extremely rare instances when I'm trying to check something out or just give it that one more listen to be absolutely sure that I really don't like it. All right, this next one here is one of those ones that when I put it on my list, I had no idea how many people love this album and how many people were going to freak out about it. But when I did my album ranking, I put it in dead last. I'm talking about alternative rockers, Smashing Pumpkins and Adore from 1998, their fourth studio album. Much more in the electronic tinged vein than what we knew them for, and maybe with the leaving of Jimmy Chamberlain, their drummer, they had an opportunity to move into something that used more drum loops and samples and that electronic tinged sound, where they could do that not having a drummer in the band. But everything that had been characteristic to the sound of Smashing Pumpkins, maybe save for Billy Corgan's vocals, which still sound like his vocals on here, but all this stuff that I had fallen in love with the band on Siamese Dream and Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness was gone on this. And it just wasn't my Smashing Pumpkins or anything that I was interested in at the time. I didn't buy it. I've since bought it and had it, and ultimately even buying the box set version of this here. But it's just one of those ones that is dead last for me to listen to, and I have tried to go back and enjoy it, but for that very different style sound, the electronica style and the 90s era loops and samples and stuff like that, which was never a favorite thing of mine. I was never into that sort of sound, came kind of post all of my interest in music. And so when a lot of my bands tried to incorporate that, it was a big turnoff, which is like this album here and why this one sits as one of my hated albums. Okay, and the last one to talk about is Heartland rocker Bruce Springsteen, We Shall Overcome, the Seeger sessions from 2006. I mentioned this one last time when talking about something about how this one might make an appearance. Now it finally is. 14th studio album, first album of entirely non-original material by Bruce Springsteen, taking on the traditional folk sounds made popular by Pete Seeger. So cover songs that Pete Seeger had done, so not even songs that he himself had written in their entirety. And it all started when Bruce Springsteen did a song, We Shall Overcome, in tribute to Pete Seeger for a tribute album. And then he decided to build an entire album around it and do it. But this one here, I ended up buying because it came with 5 bonus tracks and a DVD. It was sealed and it was only $3.99, which I think should tell you a lot about the album that ultimately was being sold for $3.99. I think it did win a Grammy and all that sort of stuff because, again, it becomes one of those critically acclaimed albums, but it doesn't sound like a Bruce Springsteen album. And he's even done one recently where he's done the R&B soul leaning stuff, and that one has been very hard for me to get into. I like it more than this, but it's just not my cup of tea. I don't really like it when artists go and make albums of a particular style that is not what they're known for and then expect all their fans to come along for the ride. But that's just me. Again, I'm sure a lot of you guys like these 10 albums I just ran through, but that's my 10 hated albums in my music collection. Episode number 4, as I said, so there are 3 more of these if you want to hear me spew some more vitriol feelings about these albums. There's 3 previous editions of it, but let me know, Let me know which ones you like out of this, certainly, but also let me know what are your hated albums. I'm always curious. Sometimes somebody will throw one out there and I'll go, oh, wow, haven't thought of that one in forever. And it is one. So you might see it appear in later episodes if I come up with enough more of these things. But all right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.